Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to replace this rear latch on your Land Cruiser 100 series or LX470. It's the rear latch that opens the tailgate. As you can see here on mine, it's gotten really rusty and it actually broke, the handle actually broke off. I tried to super glue it with some epoxy back on here, but then it ended up breaking off again. And you can see these prongs here are super rusty. The bolts are super rusty, so I said, you know what, let me just buy a new hatch. A new assembly here and get some new bolts installed. So I'm going to show you how to take this out and get a new one installed. There's 3 exterior bolts you need to remove for this assembly, and they're all 10mm. There's one here on the bottom that shouldn't be rusty because it's inside of this weather stripping, and then there's 2 on the outside that are probably going to be rusty if you're doing this repair. And you can see here I've already gotten the left side one out, and I've already cracked the right side one, so I'll show you a clip of when I did that. But I'll go ahead and get this one fully removed now. If the bolt head's pretty rusty, you might have to hammer on the socket to get a good fit around it. Next, go ahead and take a small flat blade screwdriver and pop off these 2 tabs that cover up the screws, and then we'll take a Phillips head screwdriver and get those 2 screws removed. It can be a little tricky to get this trim piece off, but if you pull the latch handle, you can kind of work it around that and work it around the actual lock, and it should slide off with a few movements. Next, grab your plastic trim removal tool and start popping away at these push pins. There are 10 of them behind this plastic panel, so do make sure you get them all popped out before trying to pull them off. It shouldn't be too difficult. Mine came off pretty easy. Now on the side pieces here, it is attached to this piece of trim that we're not taking off, just kind of hooks around it. So you will need to kind of pull this piece forward and then try and move this piece out of the way like that. I've already taken it off, so it's a little bit easier than the first time you do it, but just be patient and don't break anything. You can see here a little bit of bending in the plastic, so just give it time and patience. Our actual mechanism is back here. We have all the bolts removed, so it is loosened up. But we will need to get to it. So we need to remove 3 bolts. They're all 10mm. This one here, here, and here. You will need an extension to get to this one. And then before we do that, though, we need to unclip these 2 rods. Actually, we'll do this rod first, get the bolts out, then get this rod so we have a little bit more access. But you need to just kind of pop this plastic clip off and pull the rod up, and it's that simple. Same with this one. And once you kind of get that out of the way, we can access this, and we'll get to that part. And it shouldn't fall out on its own. It's still attached with this cable here and this rod. So we'll go ahead and get this rod off, and then we'll kind of move it out of the way to see what we need to do to get the actual assembly out. So it looks like our mechanism is sitting in there like this, and there's a rod that goes up into this arm right here. And there's a plastic clip around it, so we'll pop that off and see if we can pull the arm down and pull the actual mechanism out. Alright, so there's our old one. You can see here the mechanism itself is fine. It's just the prongs on here are so rusted off. And it wasn't really holding that old handle, and the old handle rusted off, so we just want to replace the whole thing. The main differences I see between the OEM one here on the left and our aftermarket one on the right, it looks like where our bolts go in is a little different, a little more capped off, probably to prevent water from going in. Everything else looks the same pretty much. Yeah, can't really tell too much of a difference. Looks like just a little bit of different size here on the plating, but that won't make a difference. Yeah, it looks pretty much the same. One thing we want to make sure we do to make sure our latch still works properly and our locking mechanism works is you want to get the rod on the new assembly, the new mechanism, kind of to the same spot where the old one was. That way we have the same distance of pull to engage and disengage the lock. So we'll get this one. I guess we'll go to the right here. Nope, other way. This one's definitely a little more flimsy than this one as far as trying to screw it. So we'll give it a shot at that. We can always adjust it once it's in to make sure things work properly. We'll go ahead and put this in as is. All right, so we'll try to go ahead and put the new mechanism in there and get everything lined up. Yeah, and it kind of just drops down into place once you line up those two prongs, the holes, and it looks like it's, you can't really install it the wrong way because the rod will have to be here on the right side in order for it to work, and it won't fit the other way around, so can't really mess the install of it up. So what we'll do first is go ahead and get this bracket put back on, get everything lined up, and then we'll go ahead and put this rod that connects that mechanism to everything else. That way we can see if the lock works, and if not, we can adjust it and just keep working on it until we get it to fit. So the biggest problem I ran into is I didn't realize, when you pull the handle up here, it pushes this down. There's a bit of a slide gap here where it can be in the front or the back, and you want to make sure it's pressed against the back, because what happens is when you push the handle, it's going to push this rod, which then pushes another rod, which actually does the unlocking to the unlocking mechanism. So you want to make sure that this is pushed against the back when you go to install it, and I'll kind of show you inside what it looks like and another tip to do when you're installing it. All right, so like I just mentioned, you want to make sure that let me focus up here. You want to make sure that rod is pressed all the way against the back of the mechanism. So that way, when you press the handle, it can push that rod fully and activate this up here, which then pushes this rod over here, which then in turn activates the mechanism here to actually unlock it. And one tip or trick I found out is you can actually take this hand over here and push on this this mechanism up here to get it in the right place, so that way you can put this rod in and get the maximum amount of pressure on here, because if it's pressed all the way back, you're not going to be able to get a full amount of activation here. So I actually waited till the end after I got the latch assembly installed and everything back together and bolted up and all the rods put back in, just to make sure it worked, and that way if something was messed up, I didn't have to pull the whole thing back out once the handle was already on. But when you do go to install the handle, you may need to use some sort of hammer to get it to seat on top of those pins. All right, let's go ahead and give it our final test. Awesome, so it works fine, no issues. It does feel a little bit different than the OEM one, just because it doesn't fit as perfectly here around the edges. This screw is a little bit harder to get on than the other ones. Just a little bit different fitment with the aftermarket versus the OEM, but it works fine. The handle fits on, everything works great. So we'll go ahead and get everything buttoned back up here. We'll get our panel reinstalled, and we'll get our trim piece put back in here, and then our handle back on there, and we are good to go. Hey, thanks for watching today, everybody, and make sure to like and subscribe for more videos.